This is Dateline News and Conversation. We're live again tonight. Well, it's evening time here in Yalta, in the Crimea. I've got I think, a very important show tonight. It's focused on the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney's speech at Davos. I think it was on Tuesday that he did it. And supposedly he got a standing ovation. Now, he must have said something that pleased all those billionaires at Davos. I went and I downloaded a transcript of what he said. And I have to admit that when you read it just quickly, it's like, wow, he said some things that I kind of agreed with. But then I started to look at it a little more closely, and I started to read and listen to some of the analysis that others were doing. And I thought, I've got to do a show on this. My guests tonight are two Canadians. Both of them are very well aware of what's going on in the world. They are both digital creators. They're analysts. And I'm going to basically just give the floor to them. I don't think this is going to be a debate. I don't know. I think that probably both of my guests tonight are going to have some real serious thoughts and questions that we can talk about tonight. So tonight, my guests are from Montreal and Toronto. From Montreal is a new friend, Stewart Brennan. Stewart, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Regis.
Well, I want everybody to know that you're an author, you're a poet, you're an activist, you're a geopolitical and economic analyst, and you're a digital creator. Rick Walker, we've done shows together before. Rick is he's a big-time broadcaster. He's been on national television as a broadcaster. He's been doing his own show, I think, almost every night in Ottawa. And so I'm very happy to have the two of you. Now, you heard my introduction. The thing that really, after I thought about it, that Mark Carney was at Davos. So I question anybody who's going to Davos and all the big deals and all the quote unquote leaders of countries, large and small, show up there to give their speeches. And this is how this one headline was: the most powerful Davos speech in history. I'm going to start off with Stewart, who's in Montreal. Stewart, we communicated on Facebook, and you didn't really have much good to say about Mark Carney's speech. So I'm going to throw it to you first. You go wherever you want with it, start wherever you want, and that'll start the conversation.
Sure. Okay. So Mark Carney goes to the WEF in Davos, and he says a lot of nice things. You know, when I say it sounds really good, you know, a lot of things that we need to stick together and all that stuff. The rules-based order, that's something I really don't understand, you know, because when he talks about this rules-based order, and that's broken, right? But what is that rules-based order? You know, what are we talking about? You know, we're talking about, if we go back to the Biden era, everything was hunky-dory then. You know, that was the rules-based order. They are all talking about it. And what were they doing? They were bombing Syria. They were destroying Ukraine, basically, and through the civil war, by siding on one side of a civil war. They thought this was great. You know, these are the rules based order. We've got a high moral, you know, we're not accountable to anybody. So, I mean, when he talks about well, it's broken. Well, the brokenness is probably because Donald Trump comes in with a big hammer and he starts bashing everybody over the head and says, you're going to do what we say, or we're going to sanction you, or we're going to put tariffs on all your goods. And by the way, in Canada, this is the one thing that's been bothering me for a very long time, is that Canada's already been taken over by the United States, by corporations. The major corporations, they're multinationals. They're all over the place. They've taken. I mean, once they put in free trade in '92, our manufacturing disappeared. Our jobs disappeared. We became a service industry, and we've been hollowed out. I mean, as far as the economy goes, we are hollow. We've got really nothing. People are on the, just to get an apartment or a house, it's really difficult. It's expensive as heck. I mean, it's all the speculation that they've put in. They've invited all these international corporations that they call very good, but they're working on the backs of Canadians. And so they're taking our rights away in the fact that we don't have, the next generation is not going to be able to afford to live, with the way things are. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to go with that, but I mean,
no, I want to,
a lot of things there.
we're going to come back to that, but we were talking about this rules-based order. And what most people are talking about today is a transition to a multipolar world. And this is what Carney had to say at Davos. He said, the world is in a process of rupture, not transition. And he called on medium-sized countries to come together and to unite and create pressure against the larger powers. He had to have been talking about the United States because he couldn't. I know what he feels about Russia, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, Rick, your initial reaction to that speech, and I also want your comments to see how you square with Stewart on Canada's economy. I will say one thing. My viewers, most of them know that that I was in the seminary, and I studied 4 years of college in Niagara Falls, Canada, and I love Canada. My immediate ancestors came from Quebec, and I've loved the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But my college history professor said, and I've never forgotten this, he said, the 21st century will belong to Canada. Rick, pick it up from there and go wherever you want.
I think he's right. I think he was right, Regis. And Stewart, I think that Mark Carney is giving you more of what you want than you realize. And he certainly began to do that in the speech. And Canada emerged as a global leader on the stage of the World Economic Forum with his speech by highlighting the unspoken truth of the rules-based order, the international rules-based order, which was always supposed to be based on the rule of law. And the rule of law since World War II has applied to all countries around the world except the superpowers, who have exemptions, who have exempted themselves from accountability in places like the International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice, at the United Nations. Every other country has to abide by the UN Charter, but the superpowers, including the United States and Russia, have vetoes. So it doesn't matter what the rest of the world says. Either superpower, because they have nuclear weapons, can simply step up and say, doesn't apply to us, or we didn't sign on to the ICC. Canada has. Canada always did. Canada was a founding member of all these institutions that from their inception were designed to hold all countries accountable by holding all countries accountable to the rule of law, which should be bringing true justice and accountability worldwide, but not if you're Joe Biden or Donald Trump or George Bush or Vladimir Putin. The rules don't apply because you're a superpower, and your rules apply no matter what. That's why right now you're seeing in Venezuela the United States going in, swooping in, scooping up the leader of a country, not based on the rules-based international order. It's based on laws that they're cooking up in U.S. courts, and then referring back to legal precedents set in previous U.S. courts under people like previous attorneys general. It's just the U.S. makes up its own rules because they can, because the UN doesn't apply to them. Then Donald Trump goes to the UN and criticizes all these other countries and says, "Well, what do you guys do anyway? You're nothing. The United States pays for everything, and then there's your blah blah blah." In reality, every other country is trying to do things, Canada included, but you have to live with Godzilla, and Canada has always been living in that reality. I remember you speak of going to school. When I was in university, I had a political science prof who highlighted what he called Finlandization, and that's Finland living next door to Russia. You have to basically bend the knee and find ways to keep the superpower next door happy in order to protect your sovereignty. And Canada has always been in that position. Well, certainly since the creation of the nuclear bomb, right? Because the Western world, the entire world really, but the Western world in particular, allowed the United States to take that leadership position, that role of world policeman, after allowing the United States to be the main nuclear power so that you wouldn't get the proliferation of nuclear weapons. But now you have a guy in the White House who has gone power mad, and he's walking around the world with a great big stick, slapping everybody with it. It's a great big tariff stick, but he's using economics as a weapon. And I could talk more about that. And Stewart, I understand exactly where you're coming from, I think, and I share the concerns. I don't share the pessimism. I think I have a more view of the political situation that's based more on political realism. And on the economic side, I also don't agree with the pessimism, because yes, Canada also suffered under the free trade agreement, which I was there for. I covered all of that stuff in those, that big election with Mulroney, and when it became a national question for Canada. And yeah, Canada suffered exactly the same way the United States did, not because our jobs went so much to the US, but to places like Mexico and places like Vietnam. And our textiles industry was hollowed out, and the manufacturing left a lot of it, but including auto parts, a lot of it. But Canada remains a robust G7 economic powerhouse worldwide. We're well positioned economically compared to the rest of the world. When you talk about housing, the economic drivers that you cite as being the reasons for the housing crisis in Canada are really, I don't agree with you when you're citing international investment as being the primary cause. It's demographics. It's the pressures of immigration, which is that's not race-based for me. That's simply the numbers. You're bringing too many people in too quickly, not enough housing to supply the market. But that is also what Carney is addressing in his national build plan. And he's doing it, in my view, after reading both his plan and the plan of conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Carney's plan is, in my view, more conservative, more market-driven. It focuses on building affordable homes at the lower end of the market, so that people who want to get into the market and get first-time homes are able to do that with some financial incentives and financial assistance, making it easier to get mortgages. And then over time, I mean, I pointed out on my program just 2 nights ago that my son is buying this house from my parents. They're in their 90s. And so it's just changing demographics. And over time, these people who buy these homes at entry level prices that are going to be built in Canada en masse using this plan, when older boomers eventually pass on or move into retirement facilities and so on, the demographics will change, and that will free up these homes where more equity is built into them, and the younger people will move up the ladder. But you have to give them a helping hand up in order to get into the market. I bought my first house for $67,000, but that was a long time ago. But and at the time it was a conservative government in Canada, and there were financial incentives and there was financial assistance to help people get in, just like after World War II. And we're just at one of those, I guess, turning points in history where we're facing some economic challenges, but there are always challenges, and our country is rising to the occasion. Yeah, Mark Carney is a star on the international stage today. It may change tomorrow because he's a politician, but he highlighted the shortcomings of the international rules-based order and said the quiet part out loud, that there have been big problems with it, and he had the courage to stand up to Godzilla and all the superpowers really and say, hey, you know what? The reason it has never really truly worked is because it's been partially a lie, which is a quote from his speech. And the partial lie is that, yeah, the rules never really applied to the big guys.
As an American, I should say, because you guys are Americans too. I have to stop saying that. As someone who's a citizen of the United States, and who left there because I couldn't any longer stay because of not only the political situation, but the economic situation. And as I look at it now, Rick, what's happening south of the border is not what's happening in Canada, I guess, from what you're saying.
I agree, Regis, and I don't want anything to do with that. Right. And I think, honestly, that's what Mark Carney was saying, too, in his speech. He's saying Canada doesn't want any part of your fascist dictatorship, Mr. Trump. But he's saying it in diplomatic terms. You're getting people with, chippier language, I'll say, here in Canada is trying to say it aloud. But we have to be very careful what we say as a society, and our government has to be careful what we say, because we are right next door. And Godzilla has a very big foot and can stomp on us.
Yeah, Godzilla.
Yeah.
I'm going to give Stewart a chance to respond to that, but I really didn't want to get into a debate about the economies of Canada and the United States, because from where I sit, I take issue with some of the things that Canada is supporting in terms of Ukraine and in terms of Israel. I know that there is a huge Ukrainian diaspora in Canada that controls a lot of power. Rick, we've talked about that before. What the heck, Freeland has said she's now going to become a private consultant to Zelensky in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So I have a problem looking at things geopolitically with Canada supporting the United States proxy war in Ukraine. And I also have a big problem with Canada supporting Israel with a genocide. And so if we can keep this kind of on this geopolitical level for at least a few more minutes, I'd like to get your opinion, because my mind has been made up for a long time. I'm living right next door to an all-out war, but actually we're at war here in Crimea. We get every single night 50, 60, 100 drones or missiles will be fired at some point in Crimea. We're not firing back. Russia's doing the firing. But we're extremely close to this. And as an American, as a citizen of the United States from North America, I just have a hard time dealing with that. It's and everything I do here is to expose the lies that are coming from the United States and Godzilla. So, Stewart, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Yeah. So one of the things that Carney talked about was honesty, and it's false if he's going to continue to believe that there's a two-state solution in Gaza and Palestine. It would be nice that if everything would work out, but he only supports one side. He doesn't support the other side. He doesn't protect the Palestinian people. He doesn't call for the Israelis to stop bombing. He doesn't call for them to get out of the territory they've taken. And Netanyahu's not going to do it. And this is one of the things that, let's be honest. You want to talk honesty. Talk honesty. And I don't see it from him. That's one of the points is the Gaza Palestine Israeli thing. Two-state solution would only work if they moved out and they were disarmed, actually, both sides. Never mind one. But he's talking about disarming just one side. Look, I'm Irish. Okay, I'm Canadian, but my ancestry goes back to Ireland. We were occupied for a very long time, so we understand what occupation is. Occupation is a very violent thing from a monstrous nation. They do very, very evil things. So we stand up for against things like that. I think anybody who's occupied is going to stand up for their own country. I mean, I wouldn't you? That's the thing. I mean, if your country is occupied by a monster, would you not fight back? And so that's the thing about Palestine. They're not allowing them to. They're not giving them the weapons like they're giving to Israel. Canada's giving Israel weapons, the United States, Britain, France, all those rules-based order people, they take on this persona. Oh, we're doing good, and it's for human rights. Yeah, but there's only human rights is given to the Israelis. It's not given to the Palestinian people. So that's one thing. The second thing is we want to be honest, like he says. Let's be honest. In 2014, with the help of the CIA and MI6, the United States overthrew the Yanukovych government in Ukraine. It was elected government, and it was a violent overthrow. Okay, and it later on caused a civil war within Ukraine. And so all of these leaders from France and Britain, United States, Canada, the conservative government, the liberal government, it doesn't matter which government, they're all the same. They all support one side in the civil war, okay? And that is the side of that has a neo-Nazi element. I'd say almost a Nazi element. No, that to me is just wrong. It's wrong. If you're talking about honesty and rule and a moral thing to do, I mean, they're not being moral whatsoever, So I mean, let's talk about the truth. That's what they're not doing. He's lying. Carney's lying. Yeah, now, if he starts to talk about the truth and starts laying out, okay, well, this is really what's happening, like he says he's going to do, then we wouldn't see this. Canada would pull out. That would be it. And you've got this NATO group. The United States owns the NATO group. Christ, they created it basically. Everybody else is a little member. They got these little tiny armies. The United States is the bulk of it, and they do whatever they're told because they're controlled economically. So I mean, when we're talking about honesty and everything, let's really get into the honesty of things. How about Palestine? How about the people of Palestine? How about the people of Ukraine? You're going to side one side. You go on one side of a story. You don't support the people from the western part of Ukraine. It's crazy. So the moral thing to do is be honest, but he's not being honest.
Yeah, the same thing applies to Donald Trump in spades. You know, I feel the exact same way. And, you know, I'm living through this conflict that's going on in Ukraine. And, but one of the things that I found interesting is he got Donald Trump really kind of angry at him. And Trump uninvited him to be on his board of peace in the Middle East, which is, I think, what Trump is trying to do is create his own United Nations with him as the director general or something. Yeah, it's about honesty, and you know they're all politicians, and I don't know exactly what's going on in Canada, but I have to think that there were powerful forces that basically controlled foreign policy anyway. And it's the same thing in Russia. They're very powerful forces that are pro-West, pro-capital, pro-liberal. And then there are equally strong forces that are patriotic and conservative Russians. And so when it's that political element that, you know, when you look at it, you say, okay, let's be honest about it. The other thing, well, no, I'm going to throw it over to Rick. Rick.
Do you really want honesty?
Yeah.
Is that what we're here for?
Well,
because we're not getting real honesty on either side or any, you know, political side in any of this, because it's just so overwhelmingly flooded with propaganda. And Stewart, with all due respect, I mean, I understand the position you're taking on a lot of these things, but I listen and hear a lot of propaganda. But the truth is, it's much more nuanced than that. It's not black and white. Whether you're talking about Ukraine, which is, you know, you want to talk about the violence. Yeah, it was violent. You had a big protest there. You had varying accounts of how many civilians were killed as part of the Maidan uprising, but there was a lot of blood. And it was civilians that were killed. It was, you had the U.S. involved there. You also had Russia involved. You had the EU involved. They were all currying favor with those Ukrainian politicians as Ukraine was trying to pivot to do more trade with the EU. And, you know, you had players in there, including Trump and you know, his ilk, with people like Paul Manafort, who was, you know, working with pro-Russian business interests and oligarchs, and that complicates everything. I mean, that flows from Manafort and his activities with both Russia and Ukraine, which becomes very hard for people to understand, into the first election of Donald Trump, where Manafort is a political advisor to Trump, his campaign manager, never reveals himself as a foreign agent, ends up facing charges, ends up being sentenced to 7 years in prison. I mean, all of this stuff is very real, but very few people really understand that. That's the complicating factor in this. The reality is it's being driven by big money, really wealthy people on both sides trying to assert control over the wealth of a nation, and currying favor with those who hold the political power, whether it be Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, or whatever. And it goes way back before that to, you know, with Mark Carney. If you want to go back and look at the 1998 collapse of the Soviet Union and the involvement of people like Jeffrey Sachs at the time, you know, people do not have the depth of knowledge to understand what really happened even back then. You know, the Reagan putting pressure on the Soviet Union, trying to collapse it, and they can't keep up with it was economic pressure that ultimately resulted in the fall of the Soviet Union. Then you have somebody like Jeffrey Sachs who comes in and advises economic shock therapy. Well, what the hell was that? That's a U.S. advisor working directly with the Russians and Boris Yeltsin. And as a result of his advice, they unpeg the ruble, and it collapses in value within a matter of months. It crashes the economy. Well, why did they do that? It put record numbers of people in Russia into poverty. It destabilized everything. It was essentially like hitting the big reset button, if you will. And then all of the wealth of the nation, all the debt was purged. And then you saw the oligarchs come in, and the big companies and all the wealth was divvied up and sold for pennies on the dollar to very rich people who got very, very, very rich afterward. So, I mean, that's what happens in a controlled economy. That's what Sachs advocated for. And today I watched Jeffrey Sachs on the world stage talking about all of these geopolitical things and isn't held accountable for what he did there. And I don't agree with what happened. And Carney was there in the background too at that time. He was an advisor to Goldman Sachs, and it was advising Goldman Sachs, but also provided advice to the Russian government. It's not clear what his advice was at the time, but he had a fiduciary duty to Goldman Sachs at the time. So he was looking out for Goldman Sachs, and that would be his obligation legally and ethically. So that's what he was doing at the time. But I'll tell you, like you say that, and I'm kind of I'm pivoting and going in different directions because so much ground has been covered here. But you're suspicious of anybody that speaks in Davos. Like, I don't know what more Mark Carney could have done to appease you or to even align himself with you if you were really trying to look at this objectively. He's not from the elite. This is a guy who was born in the Northwest Territories, went to school in I believe Edmonton, but he's so brilliant, so smart that with financial aid ended up going to school in Harvard, climbed the ladder, and mingles with the rich, the wealthy, the powerful, the famous. But when I listen to him, I can't argue with him. I'm not judging him based on, well, he went to the World Economic Forum, I must dismiss him. No, I judge people by their actions and by what they actually say and do. And in his speech, I see, Stewart, so much of what he says actually aligns with what it is that you actually want. And yet, even as he calls out the rules-based international order for its shortcomings, you're still critical of him. What he did took a lot of balls, actually. No other world, I don't know, very few other world leaders, maybe Scheinbaum in Mexico right now is coming out with some criticisms toward Donald Trump, but it took balls for Mark Carney to stand up there and say what he said at Davos. And as a Canadian, I'm kind of like, all right, let's go, let's do this, because contrary to what you're saying, Canada is not always a puppet of the U.S. We do comply with a lot of things, and we go along to get along with a lot of things, but there are many examples in history where Canada has not supported the U.S., whether it be in Vietnam or in Iraq. We did not fully participate in what happened there. I remember the debate at the time, and our government said, no, we're not going to fully participate. We flew some supporting flights over there that were more symbolic than anything, but we did not participate in the bombing because we did not want to be part of that. And that is what Carney is doing right now. He's saying, no, the line is drawn right here, Mr. Trump. And we do not want to be part of your immigration purge. We don't want to be shooting protesters in the streets. Yeah, we had some issues with that freedom convoy, but I'll tell you, we didn't go anywhere near as far as what I'm seeing in the United States right now, where Donald Trump is turning his thugs loose on people so that you end up with literally, I think we're up to, close to a dozen people having been shot with live ammunition in American cities because of these ICE raids, and one woman shot in the face, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And so Canada is saying no, and that's why most Canadians are saying, I don't even want to travel down there right now. So, and it goes all the way around too, Regis. I mean, it's whether it's China, which we are engaged in negotiations with, but very clear-eyed about the threats there, but negotiating with them because we have to make some changes and so be it. And I don't have an issue with it. I see China as less of a threat to Canada right now than the United States. And I see Russia as less of a threat to Canada, if at all, to Canada than the United States. The true threat to Canada right now is the U.S. Carney's acknowledging that in the best way that he can, in the most diplomatic way that he can, while still being forceful. And so kudos to him for trying to make the best of an almost impossible situation for our country.
It's always been the United States that has been our biggest enemy. It always has been, as far as I see. Well, I mean, they're on our border. They're on our the largest border. Okay, go back to 1812 if you want. You know, I mean, and look, the economic integration of all these multinationals into Canada has hollowed us out. Our look, I was part of the manufacturing industry. Okay, and I saw what happened. You know, I have an education in electronics. I have, you know, I've got an history as far as the experience. I've seen what's happened and how we've hollowed out. We've become a service industry and a warehouse industry. Our manufacturing,
and a tech industry, and a lot of other industries. Manufacturing largely.
Our industrial capacity is pretty much gone
in Ontario,
okay? And it went to China. Most of it went to China. Okay, but now we're getting.
No, it went to a lot of different countries.
From India and China. It's being a little bit more diversified, but we are not building. We're not building this country. Like we're not building like governments. Like it doesn't matter which government you have in Canada, whether it's liberal or the conservatives. They like to sell off the crown corporations, right? And our resources and the rights to our resources. So I mean, it's not something that
What crown corporations have they sold off lately?
CNR, the Petro-Canada.
That was a long time ago, and that was part of the energy program under Trudeau.
Came
from Petrofina.
It went to but that's a big company, okay, and that's our energy.
And then Suncor ended up buying it. I had a job at a Sunoco gas station when I was a kid.
Yeah. Texaco, SL, Exxon, whatever.
So,
Suncor. It's an Ontario company, actually. Yeah.
Listen, this is where I'd like to go with this, because I think you both agree that.
Yeah, I think we agree on more than he thinks.
Mark Carney pissed off Godzilla.
Yeah, he did.
Donald J. Trump.
Yeah. So what more do you want?
But it's also a bad thing, because what comes out after? Okay.
Damned if he does, damned if he does.
Now, I mean, look what Greenland. Okay. So what is he doing about Greenland? It's all about a missile shield for him, right? But it's also about arming the Arctic. So Canada's next. Okay, where they're going to go? They're going to go to Manitoba, Churchill. You know, I mean, they've been after Canada for years and years to put in military bases up in the north in the Arctic, and they're pushing. I can remember, I think it was back in the 80s when they came out with the cruise missiles. Okay, and they wanted to fire these cruise missiles right across Canada. If you recall that, I don't know if you recall that or not, but they wanted to do that. People were pretty pissed off about all this stuff.
I was doing stories back then about.
They did it anyways. They did it secretly. They did it anyways. You know, so they're going to do what they're going to do.
They didn't do it secretly. They just did it with approval. They did it with approval. I remember the protest. I covered them. I was there. Well,
there you go. Me too. So
yeah,
there you go.
So do you remember the cruise catcher?
What I think they're doing, I think they're eventually going to. I mean, they're going to make a deal for Greenland. A big military base, so you can do what you want, no problem, as long as. But they have, even though they already have a military base there, and they have military bases in Alaska, and which is the United States, anyways. We're part of NORAD, we're kind of tied to the hip with the U.S. military, and so I mean. Is there a real threat from Russia? Is there a real threat from China? I don't think so. Certainly not at this time. I think Donald Trump is really pushing for his Monroe Doctrine, okay, of taking claim of the whole goddamn Americas, all the North, South, Central. I mean. And arming. So what is he afraid of? Well, it's economics. It's always about economics, and economics is going to run through the Arctic. It's going to run through. China's going to run their containers and everything right through the Arctic, through Russia. Maybe.
Oh, well,
maybe,
I don't care. Go ahead. You want to ship through? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a. It's the thing is, he wants
to have a shipment of cars. Okay, go ahead.
He wants to put a top stop.
I don't care.
He wants total control. And that's
not a threat. What are you bringing? We're bringing a whole ship of soybeans through the Arctic. Okay, that way.
Right.
Stop up at the gas station up there and fuel up, and you can have a rest stop.
Yeah.
I really don't care. Like,
Me too.
everybody can ship through there if you want, as long as everybody's peaceful.
I think it's a problem.
Whatever.
Okay, that's basically it. That's what it's coming down to.
I want to. Both of you have mentioned the economy,
Mhm.
and this is something that I don't think too many people are paying attention to. And I haven't really thought at all about Canada and your economy. Very little about your politics. I know that you have been assisting Ukraine, so that's a negative thing for me. But in terms of the economy south of the border, the United States has extended 800, 900 military bases all over the world, tens of thousands of troops, ships, everything else, all kinds of hardware, weapons, missiles, everything else. And now they're continuing to try to expand. Trump would love to have you as the 51st state, so he could control you. He wants Greenland one way or another because two things, strategically, in terms of offensive and defensive capability against Russia, it's an important spot, but also what's under the ground and what's under the Arctic that's frozen. So economically, Trump is, he's just like a monster going after all of this. And in terms of the United States economy, you know, he increased the war budget to $1.5 trillion and another $1 trillion, I think, for his Golden Dome, which Canada doesn't want to have any part of, I understand. So another reason why Canada's pissed him off. And the United States is $38 trillion in debt, going up another $1 trillion every 6 months. They can't even, they're having a hard time paying off the interest. Household debt in the United States is $18 trillion. And it includes all the kids that went to college on daddy's wallet, have no jobs. You know, they're in kiosks, they're baristas, they're driving taxi cabs. What? So Trump is lying through his teeth when he's trying to tell the American people that there's no inflation. I've cut it down. There's jobs for everybody. Really? He gutted. No, he didn't gut, but it started with Clinton gutting American industry, which Stewart feels happened in Canada. It definitely happened in the United States. There are no more blue collar opportunities for people that fill those factories. And so I think the United States right now is in deep, deep trouble economically. Yeah. And I'll clarify that. And I want to know, I'm not expecting you to agree with me what's happening in the United States, but I'm wondering what Canada is doing to protect itself from what I think is coming. What is happening is that the rest of the world, primarily Russia, China, India, and the BRICS and those people who want to join, because of what Trump has done in the last year, are rapidly accelerating the whole process of de-dollarization to get away from the dollar. And they've already begun trading in their own currencies. China has its bank set up to replace the IMF and the World Bank, and the yuan probably will become the next major currency. I don't know about that. But what I see happening, and I see this personally, the dollar is losing value even against the ruble. The ruble was supposedly the best performing currency in the last year. Russia rose to position number 4 ahead of Japan as the strongest economies. So what I see, and I think I'm right, the rest of the world, Russia, China, India, the biggies, have been buying up gold for the last couple of years. The US dollar is no longer based on gold. It's based on monopoly money. It's based on we'll just keep printing it. The other thing that's happening is Russia is almost completely divested, if not completely, of American debt. China is still holding a big chunk.
Yeah.
Trump is pissing off China with sanctions and everything. And Russia and China is taking very deliberate but slow steps to cut America out of rare earth minerals. They're the only one that really can manufacture that stuff. So I'm wondering if you agree. Do you see the entire Western economy in free fall because of what the United States is doing? Stewart, you first, and then stick right on that subject for me now, okay? And then I want to hear what Rick has to say.
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, if you're looking at we have to look at the American dollar, right? The American dollar has been forced upon everybody after World War II. Nobody could come out of all the empires were broken and dead, and there was no other challenge. So they came up and they enforced everybody to buy American dollars, and we'll give you gold for it. And then in 1971, they changed all of that. You no longer get gold, you're going to get dollars, all right? So inflation, that's when inflation really began. Inflation started then in 71. And even in Canada, it started, but it started to really take off in 74 when they changed to how we deal with our government money. Okay, it went from there. But as far as gold goes, I mean, look at it doesn't lose its value. It's gone up in value, but it's because all the currencies have gone down in value. Here's Canada, the second largest country in the world with all these resources. I got this question: how come our dollar is worth less than the euro? Because really, what powers an economy is oil. Oil is oil and gas, basically, and they've got very little of it. They depend upon the United States for their oil and gas. Canada does have oil. It has the tar sands muck, and so does Venezuela. They find a way to turn it into gas, But what controls? I mean, this is what the Americans have been after for since 9/11. They've been going after all the oil-producing countries. That's what all the countries that are being attacked right now are oil producers. If you or the ones that they already destroyed, like Libya and Syria and Iraq, and you can go into Africa, even into the Sudan. I mean, even Yemen, the little Yemen has a little bit of oil, but the other ones they don't attack are the ones that are already under their vassalage. But Venezuela, boy, oh boy, the biggest one, Canada is right down behind it, not too far. So you want to have an economic war, which is what the United States is doing right now. Everybody wants to pull away from what's going on because it's not good business to throw tariffs at people and bang them down on the head with them. So I mean,
but do you see it, the Western economy based with the United States being the biggest chunk? Do you see it in free fall? And Rick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, maybe I can clarify the whole thing a little bit more. And I agree with Stewart when he says that the United States is going after the oil, and that is because inflation has always been built into the economy. And when you have a fractional reserve banking system, even if it's based on the gold system, you need actually a bit of inflation in order to ensure liquidity within the market so that people always have some cash out there to pay bills. But the point is that in the 70s with Nixon, the U.S. did come off the gold standard, which I don't really, I used to be more of a gold standard guy, but I understand that allows for far more economic expansion because you're not tied simply to how much gold, which is sort of a bit of a, it's a bit of a fantasy to think that it really provides full liquidity in the event of a run on the bank or something, because it's only a
Not
fraction of what's actually out there in cash. But anyway, what they did instead is it wasn't based on monopoly money. The US dollar has been the petrodollar, because after taking the dollar off the gold standard, there was a deal made with Saudi Arabia where all the oil purchased would be from Saudi Arabia would be purchased in US dollars to ensure that there was always demand for US dollars on the foreign exchange markets, and that ensures the value of the dollar to keep it elevated. That over time has become that deal is slowly evaporating, although the Saudi currency is still pegged with the US dollar today. The Canadian dollar is not. It floats on the foreign exchange markets. But the Saudi dollar is still pegged there. But yes, you're quite right to point out that the United States is heavily in debt. The problem with the economic policies of the Trump regime, administration, whatever you want to call this thing, is that it's based on contraction and isolation. And the United States is carrying over $30 trillion in debt, a lot of it accumulated because of military spending around the world. Trump says that's the United States being ripped off. In reality, no, it's the United States not paying its bills to debtor nations. So not really paying for anything. That's the largest problem. But he doesn't like electric cars because he wants people burning oil, because that helps prop up the US dollar. But with these tariffs, which are mutually destructive, which he doesn't understand, it results in inflation on the home front, economic contraction. And as he pulls away from NATO, as he pulls away from these alliances and even economic partnerships with traditional allies of the United States, he is pulling back and he's pulling the United States into itself. That's going to result in massive economic contraction. And when you do that, you will not be able to sustain the debt, because the economy will become much smaller. And you need economic expansion to service the debt month over month, year over year. Soon the United States won't be able to pay its debts. So that's the problem. I'm sorry for my phone ringing.
Everything requires growth, and growth is exponential. So no matter what, you're going to reach a point where you can no longer grow, and you're going to start to contract. And that's
no.
No. If you look,
growth is not always exponential.
And look at the way the monetary system is. It's always, you always have to have growth. If you don't have growth, your costs will go up, and then all of a sudden, boom, your profit margin is gone. Eventually you go bankrupt. And also they always require growth. That's what corporations need. That's what banks need. The banks need, but even though they create the debt to begin with. But let's
you need to be able to sustain your debt, and you need to be able to fund your unfunded liabilities heading into the future for things like pension plans and things of that nature. Canada's in a much better position when you look at those numbers and the debt to GDP ratio by far than the United States. The United States is not in the best position at all. That's why they have to keep raising the debt ceiling, removing the cap. And every budget, they go through that ritual of, we're not going to take it off, and then the Republicans pretend to be all upset, and then they raise the debt ceiling anyway. But the United States does need growth in order to sustain its debt, because you have to pay the interest on the debt and it's these smaller nations, the medium-sized nations, even countries like China, that hold a lot of that U.S. debt. And as the United States contracts, pulls back into itself with this America First policy, which is just insane, the United States is contracting its economy. The tariffs are meant to protect U.S. jobs and repatriate manufacturing to the United States. But in so doing, Trump is actually going to be trading less and alienating himself from other markets, including Canada. So the United States will only be selling to itself. Well, countries like China are focused on supplying the entire world. And that's where Canada is going. It's like, you don't want to trade with us? You don't want our cars? fine, Donald Trump, when you go ahead, take these factories, we're gonna make this deal with China. And I can get into the details on that and why what Carney did there, which really pissed Trump off, was just necessary to do it, and it takes balls to do it. But the question is, will the United States, will Godzilla allow us to do it? But
China doesn't have debt. Okay,
you know,
China has very little debt. Okay, don't forget. No, they have 4 national banks. Okay, which spurs their growth. Yes, the growth also comes from they don't have the debt like, let's say, the United States. When you have a private bank, you have to pay it all back. All right. When you have a national bank, and Canada used to have a national bank,
has pretty substantial debt too, and they do have nationalized industry.
Using it in 1974, and that's when we started to go into debt.
No,
yes,
we had that before that.
I'll tell you. I mean, it's
simply not true.
All the information is.
Are you going to start talking about the Comer case next?
Come on. You know.
Okay, guys, we got about
anyway,
5.
We should focus on the Carney speech, I suppose, because that's the subject.
Well, I think the Carney speech, to me, said a lot of good things to the rest of the world, and that the rest of the world is feeling. I don't think there's a whole lot of debate there. Okay,
I'll agree to that. I'll agree to that. But if he's going to say something about honesty, come on, be honest.
I know. I hold the government of the United States the same way. All the governments across Western Europe, including maybe the Russian government. Now, what I want to say in conclusion, I think you both know that Carney is looking to protect Canada. He's looking to trade with other countries, and that's a good thing. In fact, that's exactly what Russia has been doing for the last 14 years. There's almost 3,000 sanctions that the United States has put on Russia, and it's all backfired. Russia's economy is robust. I can vouch for that. I'm living here. There's no shortage of everything. Inflation last year was at 5.5%. If someone wants a job, they've got a job. There's the construction is booming. You talk about growth. And I don't care where you go. You go to small towns, you go to big cities, there's construction cranes all over the place. Something big is happening here in Russia. And they're fighting a war, but at the same time, their economy is growing. Why? Because Russia doesn't care about any more sanctions. And as long as China and India primarily keep buying all that Russian gas and oil, the Russian economy is going to continue to grow. It's not just Russia and China. I mean, India is involved in this now. It's Central and South America. And so what I see happening, and you know, maybe we could pick this up again, but I'm having these conversations with a lot of different people from an American and Russian perspective, that the United States is losing big time. It's lost its primary influence around the world. The only thing that it has left is threats of sanctions on other countries, which I think is only accelerating de-dollarization and the threat of military intervention. And I don't see how the United States can sustain any of that. And my hope for Canada, because I love Canada, you know, that's where my family is from. I went to school there. I have so many friends across Canada. I want to see Canada go in the same direction that Russia has gone. Okay, Donald Trump, Godzilla. We don't like what you're doing. It's not really helping us very much. So we have the rest of the world. What I would hope, and I would entertain this discussion with you guys at a future date, I'd love to see Canada join BRICS.
Yeah, that would be nice.
No, I'm saying from my point of view and where I'm sitting, I would love to see Canada join BRICS. Anyway, I want to thank you both. I know that, you know, it's a healthy thing to be able to agree and to disagree. I think dissent is important in any country that wants to be free. So I appreciate the differences in opinion. I have them with everybody. But this is what's great about, I think,
I think we all
what
do.
we're trying to do is we're trying to find the truth. And the truth will come when people can communicate, people can argue, and people can be convinced of different points of view. I want to end on this note. I want to end on this.
Sorry.
I want to end on this note.
Yeah.
Donald Trump. Okay. One of you mentioned, I'm not so much paying attention to somebody's words. I want to look at their actions. And when I see what Donald Trump is doing around the world, he's floating words out there that he's not following, except to threaten to hammer people. And especially in these talks with Russia, he's trying to hold a carrot out there with Witkoff and his son-in-law Kushner to try to tempt Putin and the Russians into making some real estate deals or some investments. But that man has not done one thing, concrete thing, to show Russia that he's serious. And there are so many things that he could have done: take away some sanctions, return the consulates that Obama stole, any number of small things, get back into the nuclear arms treaty. And so this is the thing. I think it applies to Trump. And I think Putin has been the most consistent with all of this, but I think it applies to Canada as well. Okay? You go your own way. And I don't think you can go your own way and stay alone in this world that's emerging, this new multipolar world. I'd love to see Canada become a part of it. That's my opinion. Anyway, guys, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I've really appreciated it.